Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about over the past week, and I do have one to mention this week, and that's that there is a new campaign announced for the game The Fox Experiment. And if you're not familiar with this game, it's by the same designer who created the game Wingspan, which was quite a hit, and a lot of reviewers did seem to like this game even more than Wingspan. For myself, I personally do like Wingspan better than this game. Wingspan's not my favorite game of all time, but I think it's okay. And this one is also okay, but I found that it gets a little bit repetitive the more that I play it. There's no launch date for this one just yet, but I expect it'll launch within the next few months. So if you do want to learn more about this one and how it plays, I actually do have a video out for this one already that you can go ahead and check out. But other than that, I will be covering the new campaign during the week of its launch, so make sure to subscribe down below. As always, I do like to give a quick shout out to Alex over at Boardgame Co. and Mike over at Zillow Blitz because I do work with both of them to keep track of all these upcoming campaigns. Alex does post a video at the start of each month letting you know of the heavy hitters for that month, but then I provide these videos each week giving you updates and any new additions to that list. Zillow Blitz focuses more on the historical war games, so if you are interested in those games, he covers a lot more of them than I do. It's not really something I dive into as deeply, but I will give a quick overview of the ones I am aware of. But he has a few other sources, and he will be providing you with all the info that you need for that, so feel free to check these channels out and subscribe if you do like their content. Just one last thing I want to mention is that I will also be attending BreakoutCon here in Toronto this weekend, so if you are planning to attend, feel free to reach out or say hello if you see me there, because I'm always happy to chat or even possibly play a game. Looking forward to hanging out and playing some games, but that's everything I have for an intro, so let's check out the Kickstarters. And the first campaign we have is launching on the 18th, and this one is called The Dead Keep, and this is the next game offered by CMON, and this plays 1 to 6 players and takes about 90 to 180 minutes to play. And I did want to start with this one because I'm not sure if this is actually a traditional campaign. On the campaign page, it says be notified of pre-orders. So it looks like they're using Gamefound as a web page to host their pre-orders. I'm not really sure how that is different than a campaign. So it might be that this is just a regular campaign. They're just choosing the words a little bit differently here than usual. But this is a cooperative dungeon crawl campaign game where players are on a quest to search for the legendary Dead Keep. The reason you want to find that is because there are untold treasures and possibly the secrets to immortality. But like most of these legendary locations, there's no one that's really been there and actually made it back alive. And there is just not a lot known about how to get there, where it is, or what exactly you'll find there. But lucky for your party, you do have some investors funding your expedition, and you're going to be choosing your characters that each have asymmetrical abilities, and you'll also be able to upgrade them with different items and weapons, as well as just upgrade their abilities as the game goes on as well. Because something that is interesting about this one is that it actually looks very similar to another game by CMON, which is known as Zombicide, because you're actually going to be using almost the exact same player boards as you see in Zombicide, and even the maps look very similar, so I imagine the gameplay is going to be very similar to Zombicide, but this is with a completely different theme, and it's also tacking on a campaign and all those campaign elements, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of new mechanisms introduced as well, but it does have the same designers from Zombicide. Like I said, this game does offer an entire campaign mode, but each of the scenarios can also be played standalone as well if you're not interested in playing an entire campaign. And of course, there'll be a bunch of different enemies and bosses showing up on the map, but players are also going to have to be aware of the mist, which I assume is going to be an encroaching fog that's going to be taking over different areas of the map and causing different enemies to spawn there, causing you to have different negative effects if you end up in those spaces. There's not a whole lot of info on this one at the time of me filming this video, but hopefully that general overview gave you a decent idea if you want to look into this one any further, and if you do, I will have a link to the campaign in the description below where you can find all the info that they post up as soon as it launches, and of course you can follow along to get notified once those pre-orders go live. Really interested to see what exactly these pre-orders are. It seems like a new concept here to Gamefound, or at least it's not something that I've seen before. Hopefully it's something good for the community overall, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And this next campaign is also launching on the 18th, but this one's not exactly a board game. Instead, it's a tool that allows you to play different games with your friends over just a webcam over the internet. And the way that this works is that you'll be able to upload high-resolution images of all the different cards and components that are needed to play the game. And what it'll do is actually record the play area in front of you and then share it with all the players that you're playing with. But it will use image recognition in order to replace any cards and components with their high-resolution counterparts so that anyone that you're playing with can actually see what you're doing in high resolution, which comes with some added benefits like allowing players to zoom in on the cards in order to read them and things like that. But this is a system that does work primarily with card games. So if you're interested in taking some of your game nights to the digital world while still using actual cards in order to play the games, this is definitely something that you'll want to check out, and I'll have a link to it in the description below. And launching on March 19th, we have High Noon Heist, and this plays 2 players and takes about 10 to 20 minutes to play. And this is a head-to-head card game where one player is going to be playing as the Law, and then the other player is going to be playing as the Outlaws. So I ended up losing some of my footage, so I'm going to re-record some of this now, but I'm at my hotel here at BreakoutCon, so I apologize for the video and probably the terrible audio, but I wanted to give you a bit of an outline of how this game plays. And this is a head-to-head game where one player plays as Law, and the other player plays as the Outlaws. Every round a location card is going to be revealed that has some sort of game-changing effect, as well as a number of victory points it grants. Each player is going to be simultaneously revealing a card from their hand, with a higher value being the winner of that round, but each of the cards also has a special game-changing ability that will also come into effect. Each player has 8 of these cards, and once you use one, it's going to be discarded, but you do have a card that will allow you to get those back. But since each player does have a set amount of cards, that means each player has a good idea of what cards the other player has left. Some abilities can actually send cards to a separate discard pile that makes them a little bit more difficult to get back, but once all those location cards have run out, the player with the most victory points wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I'll have it linked down below. And now also launching on the 19th, we have Incal Infinite. And this plays 2 to 4 players and takes just 30 to 45 minutes to play. And this is a game that's based on a comic book with the same name, but they turned it into a cooperative game here. But I did also already cover this one last week, but it got pushed back until now. So I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. But if you want to check it out, I will have it linked down below. The way the game works is that you're going to be putting a bunch of these location boards in a circle in the middle of the table, and there's a bunch of these locations offered in the game, but you're only going to be playing with a small subset of them, which is going to add a ton of variety from game to game. But within each of these locations is a semicircle cut out in the side, and you're going to be randomly assigning a token to that location face down, with each of the tokens having a number on it. And the goal of the game is to try and flip all those tokens up in ascending order, and if you're able to do that, then you win the game. But if you ever attempt this and get any of them out of order, then all the players automatically lose. Not only that, but you're also going to be including a random enemy in each game, and there's a bunch of different enemies offered in the game as well, and they're each going to be adding their own rules and unique loss conditions to the game, as well as some different effects that the players will have to deal with. The way that players gain more information as to which token is located at each location is by playing the appropriate sets of cards at that location, and the sets required are depicted on those individual boards. There's a few different types of cards with different numbers on them, and the different locations might require you to have certain sets of numbers or certain sets of cards, or maybe a combination of the two. But once you are able to complete that objective, then the player that was able to do that is going to be able to look at the token at that location. Players will be taking turns performing their actions in this game, and on your turn you have 3 different actions that you can choose from. You can either choose to move the spaceship, and anytime that you do that, you always have to move counterclockwise. You can move any amount, but anytime that you pass the enemy, that's actually going to be adding a damage card to your discard pile, and then it's also going to cause the enemy to move 1 space counterclockwise. But wherever you do decide to stop, you'll also be able to place any sets of cards from your hand onto that specific location. You'll let me check in if the conditions of that location have been met, and if they were, then you'll be able to look at the token at that location. The other action you can perform is to simply draw back up to your hand limit. You're going to be drawing from the shared deck, but if you do have any cards left in your hand, you can also choose to discard one of them before you do so. And you're also going to be adding a damage card to the discard pile anytime that you do perform this action, so you do want to perform it sparingly. But the final action that players can perform is to attempt to flip all the tokens in the appropriate ascending order. If they're able to do that, then they win the game, but if they get a single one incorrect, then everybody loses. So you only want to be performing this once you're absolutely sure, because you're only going to get one crack at it. But there are even more ways to lose the game, because if the enemy ever makes a full rotation around the board, then you also lose the game that way. And also, if a player ever has 3 damage cards in their hand at any point, then you also lose the game. And the thing about damage cards is that they never get discarded. Even if you perform the action to draw back up to your hand of cards, you can never discard the damage cards. Luckily, there are a few one-time use special actions that players can perform, and you'll be able to do this anytime that you stop the ship at this location at the bottom here. There's going to be a bunch of different tokens down there that all represent different special actions, and once you perform that action, you'll be flipping that token and then continuing on with the game, hopefully in a better position than you were before. But the game continues like this until either one of those lost conditions are met, or a player was able to flip all those tokens up in ascending order, and at that point, you either win or lose the game. And if you want to learn more about this one, I will have it linked in the description below. And of course, you can click to follow along and get a free gift added to your pledge. Also launching on the 19th, we have Super Boss Monster, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes just 30 minutes to play. And this is an improved version of the original game Boss Monster, and it also adds a few new mechanisms into the game. But the designer listened to the community here, got a lot of feedback from their original game, which was very popular, took those ideas and feedback and incorporated that into this new version, adding a few things that I think do improve the game quite a bit. The nice thing about this is that there's not massive changes to the game, and this version is completely backwards compatible with that original game. And I do think the original Boss Monster does look like a ton of fun, but I think the new additions that they added to this make it even better, and I'm really happy to see that. And I'll get into more of that as I explain how both the original game and this newer version play and how they differ. But because I really like what I'm seeing here and I really like the improvements that they've made, this one is my own personal pick of the week. But if you're not familiar with how the game actually plays, this is a game where players are competing to build up their own side-scrolling dungeons by chaining together different room cards in order to create that dungeon. At the start of the game, each player is going to be choosing a boss monster to start their dungeon with, and this is going to be the first card that you put out in front of you, but it's always going to be the last card in your dungeon, so every time that you're adding a new room card to your dungeon, you're always adding it to the left of your boss monster. Players are also going to have a hand of room cards that they'll be able to choose from when adding new cards into their dungeon, but each round there's going to be a number of hero cards that are going to be drawn, and the icon in the top right corner indicates the icons that are going to be attracting that specific hero to the dungeons. This means whichever player has the most of those icons currently in their dungeon is going to be drawing that particular hero to their dungeon. But before that happens, all the players are going to be drawing another room card into their hand and then choosing one to play into their dungeon. Dungeons do have a limit of 5 cards, but you can also replace cards in your dungeon with another one from your hand if you think something else might work a little bit better for you for that round. And also there are advanced rooms that if you have a room matching that icon already in your dungeon, then you can place your advanced room on top of that card in order to put it into your dungeon, and the advanced cards are normally a little bit more powerful. Heroes can have different health points or a different amount of damage that they can deal, but anytime that a hero enters your dungeon, they're going to be starting at the leftmost card and then moving through towards your boss. They're going to be inflicted with the amount of damage indicated on your card, but then also possibly triggering different effects as they move through your dungeon. If the hero makes it all the way to your boss before they're defeated, then you're going to be gaining the amount of damage indicated on that card. But if you are able to kill the hero before they make it there, you're going to be able to keep that card as a victory point for the end of the game. There's also special item and spell cards that players can gain in various ways for one-time use special abilities that they can use to their advantage at any time, but the first player to claim 10 heroes wins the game. But these are just the rules for the original game. Like I said, this new version is going to be making some changes, and the biggest change here is that they're going to be adding this town board. The way this comes into play is that instead of the heroes being just put into the center of the table, they're instead going to be put onto this board, and they're going to be gaining some special abilities or upgrades depending on the area that they are placed into. This does make them a little bit harder, but players will also gain access to their minion worker, and you'll be able to move your minion worker out on the city board as well, gaining you some special abilities or special effects depending on where your minion is during that round. And something else that I think is a massive improvement is that instead of just drawing a new room card every round from the deck randomly, they're instead going to be put out at the bottom of the board, and players are going to be drafting this depending on their player order, which is determined by certain cards that you have in play and the amount of experience points that are depicted on them. But I like this for a few reasons, because it gives you a little bit more control over the cards that you'll get into your hand, but it also allows you to see some of the cards that your opponents are getting, giving you some idea of what they could be possibly going for in terms of those icons and the different cards that they might put into their dungeon. I really do love what I'm seeing with this one, and I think it's a great example of how to improve upon a game. It's not adding a whole lot of complexity or a whole lot of additional components. I think there's this misconception that a better game is a bigger game, and the more that you can cram into it, the better that game is, but I just don't think that's true. I think there is a nice balance of the amount of fun that a game gives versus the amount of effort that it asks of you. I think this game does hit that sweet spot, and it's something that you could get to the table quite easily, even with these new additions to the game. So definitely check this one out if you are interested in it, and I will have it linked in the description below. Also on the 19th, we have Backstabbers, and this plays 3 to 6 players and takes just 10 to 30 minutes to play. In this game, players are all thieves that have just completed a heist, and it's time to split up that loot. But since you are thieves, maybe just keeping all that loot for yourself sounds a little bit nicer, and that's going to be your goal in this game, because in this game, each player is going to represent a different member of that heist, and you're each going to have your own personal player boards. Along with your boards, each player is going to have a number of cards labeled from 1 through 5. Players are going to be assigning these cards to their board with the value of the card representing your stat for the particular location that you assign it to on your board. This could dictate things like your health, but also the value of the stat for various actions like attacking, defending, grabbing coins from the table, or stealing coins from the other players. Not only that, but each of the players is also going to have a deck of cards that represents each of their opponent's characters, and you're going to be using this deck in order to target one of your opponents. The way that all of this works is that players are going to be choosing 2 cards in secret. One of them is going to be the opponent that they want to target, and then the other one is going to be one of the action cards on their own personal player board. And I should mention that all of these are hidden when you place them, but players are going to be simultaneously flipping both of those cards at the same time, and then all the actions resolve simultaneously, which means that any players that chose to attack are going to be dealing that amount of damage to the opponent that they targeted, unless that player decided to do the defend action, and in that case they're going to be defending against that number of attack points. But then of course there are the other actions like stealing gold from the various areas, which will also come into play the exact same way. If a player's health goes to 0, then they're eliminated from that round, and you can win a round by either being the last player standing or being the first player to gain 10 coins. The game continues like this until a player has won 3 rounds, and then that player wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I'll have it linked down below. Also on the 19th, we have Acornism, and this plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to play, and this one is a competitive tile placement game. And the way that this game works is that each player is always going to have 4 tiles in their hand, and each of these tiles will have one side with an animal and one side with a number of acorns. The side with the animal also does have a number on it indicating how many acorns that animal wants, and players are going to be gaining victory points by fulfilling that requirement, gaining a victory point for each animal that they are able to fulfill. The way that all of this works is that the game's going to be starting with a single tile out on the table, and then players are going to be taking turns choosing a tile from their hand and then putting it into play following the placement rules. And those rules are pretty simple here. All you have to do is place it adjacent to an existing tile, and also you can never have an animal side by side with an animal or an acorn side by side with an acorn, which means that each of the images on each side of the tile do have to be alternating, like you can see in this example of the game here. But like I said, each of the animals will be associated with a particular number, and that's the number of acorns you need to get around them in order to fulfill their requirement. If you're able to do that, you get to put your token on that animal, indicating that you have earned that victory point. But this is easier said than done, because in order to actually fulfill that requirement, you have to get the exact amount of acorns around that animal. If you get more or less, then nobody is gaining those victory points. And also, you can only ever claim it when all 4 sides adjacent to that animal have been filled, which means that even if they have the appropriate amount of acorns around them, but not all sides of the tile have been filled in, then nobody can claim that victory point yet, because there are also tiles with no acorns on them that you can use in that scenario. That's pretty much all you need to know to play this game, except for there is also this magical acorn icon here, which is always whatever amount you want it to be at any point in the game for any animal. So this can change values depending on who's using it and at which time in the game, but it gives you a lot of flexibility anytime that you're trying to claim an animal adjacent to that tile. And also the entire grid can only ever be an 8x8 grid. So the game ends once no more tiles can be placed, and then the player with the most victory points at that time wins the game. And if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also on the 19th, we have Requiem, the Downfall of Magic. And this plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this one is a cooperative narrative campaign game set in the world of Black Rose Wars back in the 1500s. And if you're not familiar with Black Rose Wars, that is another very popular series of games offered by Ludus Magnus Studio. And this is going to continue to build out that world. But in this game, players are going to be playing as asymmetrical characters, all designed to complement each other in different ways so that each character will work better in certain scenarios than others. Each player has their own personal player board that they're going to be using to track the different things like their number of actions and their health and their stats, as well as their own special ability. And this is a game that doesn't have any particular player order. Any player can take actions in any order. You can just do whatever you think is most beneficial to your party. But like I said, this is a campaign game, and players are going to be playing through a campaign booklet, going through the different scenarios that could have different outcomes depending on the successes, failures, or decisions that the players make. And this all takes place in a world where religions and cults and rival factions have the majority of control over the world, and they may or may not be working together or against each other amongst themselves. Depending on the scenario, players are going to be setting up the main board with various tiles and tokens, and then players are going to be using actions in order to move about those tiles, flipping them over by exploring them, and then also resolving any effects or points of interest that they choose to interact with on those tiles. Each scenario also comes with a scenario deck, and anytime that you see a particular icon on a tile that's revealed, you're going to be drawing one of the cards from that deck, which can cause different events or reveal different side quests or progressions in the story, but it can also add more enemies onto the map because there's going to be a bunch of different cards mixed into this deck. If you do find yourself face to face with an enemy, battle in this game is resolved by using dice rolling, where you're going to be rolling 2 dice for your hero and then 2 dice for the enemy. Of course, there's a bunch of different abilities and effects that each enemy can have, and also the players will have different items and gear and abilities that they'll be able to take advantage as well in order to augment the results of their dice. But players essentially continue like this until all of the players have passed. Then we move into the enemies phase, where they're going to be moving and attacking any of the players that they're able to, and then you're going to resolve any end of round effects or events that might be in play for that particular scenario. And then the player's action tokens will refresh along with any start of round effects. And then the game continues like this until players are able to fulfill the requirements of that scenario. And if they're able to do that, then they can move on to the next chapter in the game. If you are interested to learn more about this one, I will have it linked in the description down below. Also on the 19th, we have River Valley Glassworks, and this plays 1 to 5 players and takes just 25 to 45 minutes to play. And this is a competitive set collection game where players are trying to collect different types of glass from the river in order to gain the most victory points at the end of the game. Players are going to be scoring victory points for every row that they're able to complete on their own personal player board, as well as scoring the 2 largest columns on their board at the end of the game. And anytime that you add glass to your board, you always have to add it to a column matching that color, or if you don't have one yet, you're going to be adding it to the leftmost available column in order to start a new one. But this is a game where players are going to be taking turns performing one action on their turn, and there's only 2 actions to choose from. You can either draw river glass or you can place river glass. And the way that each of those actions work is that in order to draw river glass, you're going to be looking at the main lake here, and then you'll be able to choose 4 of the 5 pieces of glass that are located in that lake. And there's always going to be 5 pieces here because anytime that a player takes 4 of those 5, those are going to be replenished, bringing that number back up to 5. But this is important because you need this glass in order to perform the other action, which is the place glass action. But one thing to note about the glass that you take from the lake is that you never actually place that glass onto your player board. Instead, it's going to be going into your hand, which you'll then be able to spend to claim glass from the river, which then goes onto your player board. And the river is broken into a bunch of different tiles, and each of them have different shaped glass icons on the edges of them. And what you'll be doing is spending one of the pieces of glass that you got from the lake, and then putting it on the associated tile that matches its shape. And then that allows you to take all the glass from one of the adjacent tiles. You'll then be able to put all the glass that you just claimed onto your personal player board following those placement rules. And then that empty tile is going to be moving all the way upstream to the leftmost location in this river, and then getting some new pieces of glass put on it. The game continues like this until a single player has a certain amount of glass on their board that triggers the end of the game. But one more thing to note is that whenever you do have to put glass onto your personal player board and you don't have a location for it, then that's going to be going into your overflow area. And also you do have a hand limit to the amount of pieces of glass you can hold in your hand. And if you ever go over that, you're going to be putting the extra ones into your overflow section as well. And any glass that you have in the overflow area at the end of the game are going to be giving you negative victory points at the end of the game. So you really don't want that to happen, but the player with the most victory points at the end of all that wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, I will have it linked in the description below. And launching on March 20th, we have Reign of Hades, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes 1 to 2 hours to play per scenario, because this is a cooperative game where players are going to be working together as Greek gods fighting back against Hades and his minions. Because Hades is the god of the underworld, but in this story he's trying to take over the living realm as well. So he has tricked you and your party into coming to the underworld, where he has poisoned you and knocked you out and zapped you of all your godly powers. And it's up to you to make your escape, power back up, and put him back where he belongs. And I really do like what I'm seeing with this one, because it looks like it has a lot of really neat and unique mechanisms. And not only that, for a campaign game that's offering this much, it doesn't look too fiddly to set up and play, which I am always a huge fan of. But the way that all this works is you're essentially playing the campaign through this booklet, which makes it really easy to set up each of the scenarios. And this is going to provide the main map. And something to note about the map is that there are sections known as the battleground, and then there are sections known as cover. And players can be in the battleground or in cover, and that's going to be changing the actions that you have available to you at that time, with the players in cover mostly being more of a support role. But I really do love the way that all of this works, because each player is going to have their own personal player board, and you're going to be able to upgrade your god and your board as the game goes on. And you're also going to be using cards to perform your actions throughout the game. But both your player board and your cards are broken into 2 separate areas, with one side being for the battlefield actions and one side being for the cover actions. So although there is a lot going on here, you're only ever worried about one side at a time, depending on the area that you're currently residing on the map. Not all the cards work this way. Some of them can only be used when you're in cover, and others can only be used in the battlefield. But I really do like that there is a few different options here, with some of those cards falling into those categories, and then some of them giving you different options depending on where you are, because that's going to give you another decision point to decide if you want to use that card now where you are, or if you want to save it for a future turn. But on a player's turn, they'll be able to play up to 4 of these cards to the bottom of their board, and you'll be able to perform the action specified on that card, which can be very unique and specific to that card, or it can allow you to perform one of the basic actions out on your player board. And there are also cards that allow you with different benefits for battle, which is really important, because letting too many enemies build up on the map could be one of the ways that you lose the scenario. One thing to know about your action cards is that this does utilize a bit of deck building, which means that you do get them back later in the game, except for your combat cards, which go into a separate pile and you have to perform a particular action to get them back. So you do want to be very strategic with when you play those cards. And you don't want to end up in a situation where you've used all of those way too early and you're not able to fight off those enemies. But aside from helping you in battle, these actions can also allow you to move around on the map, interact with different points of interest for different effects and benefits, or even to advance the story forward. And also some of these actions can gain you with different resources that you'll be able to accumulate and then spend for various events in game, or even spend them to heal yourself or other characters, or even gain permanent upgrades to your own character, because this is a game that offers a lot of opportunity for upgrades, because like I said, you are gods and you have all been zapped of all your powers. This gives a lot of opportunity for growth. So you can actually upgrade this board where you're tracking all of this, but you can also upgrade your player board as well as your actual character card, because you can actually replace that with a better version of the card. And you can also modify the different cards that you have access to for your actions. The cool thing about your board is that there's a bunch of different token locations that can be swapped out with different tokens, and as you level up, you'll have different options to put into those slots. But as you're playing the game, more and more enemies are going to be spawning out on the main board, and if you ever start your turn in a location with an enemy, that essentially represents how much danger is in that location, and you're going to have to draw that many enemy cards every time that you start your turn there. Each of these cards can have a special ability as well as a different amount of health and a different reward if you defeat them, but you will want to try and defeat these as soon as they appear, because they'll also have ongoing effects that will trigger every single round they go undefeated. And also, when they are not defeated in the round that they are drawn, then they're going to be moving to this board here. And once this board is completely full of enemies, that's going to be triggering the end of the round. And this could cause you to lose that scenario, because one thing that's really neat about this game is that there is a main goal that you're trying to complete for the best outcome, but there are also some alternative objectives that you could be completing along the way. And if you complete enough of those, or a certain one that will trigger a different outcome if the end game gets triggered early, then it will allow you to fail forward, but probably with you and your team just limping a little bit more. This one has a lot of elements that I think look like a ton of fun, and if the players are able to complete all these scenarios, then you're going to be moving forward throughout the campaign with different outcomes depending on the successes and failures of the players. But if you do want to learn more, I will have it linked down below, and of course you can click to get notified once it launches. And launching on March 23rd, we have We All Take From the River, which plays 1 to 5 players and takes about 90 to 270 minutes to play. And this is a game that can be semi-cooperative or cooperative or completely competitive, because it all depends on the goals that the players draw at the start of the game. Because at the start of this game, players are going to be drawing different goal cards, and you could be drawing goals that coincide with other players, or you could be drawing goals that go completely against them. But essentially, this game's all about respecting or not respecting the ecosystem and then facing the repercussions of that, because players will be trying to cut down trees and fish from the river in order to fulfill the requirements of their goals. But if you all push just a little bit too much, that could actually destroy the ecosystem and possibly cost everyone the game. What's neat about this game is that players are going to be building different types of structures in order to help along with their goals and grant them with different actions. And for each structure you build, that's going to give you an additional action on your turn. But there's going to be a river flowing through the center of the board. And if you build your structures more upstream on that river, then you're going to be able to take your actions first. But if you build them more downstream, then you're going to have access to more resources and more options when you take your action. Different actions can allow you to harvest wood, fish, or even earn gold, and also develop a city that's going to be competing with the environment in that location. But if you do collect too much wood, that could cause different things like causing floods, whereas overfishing is going to severely deplete the amount of fish you see in the future. And of course, certain actions can also generate pollution, which can have a variety of effects. If all that sounds interesting to you, you can check this campaign out. I will have it linked in the description below. And that's everything I have for you this week, but don't leave yet, because we still got a couple awesome giveaways to announce, and these are the easiest giveaways to enter ever. All you got to do is leave a comment down below, and that'll get you an entry into these giveaways. And the first one we have is for a pretty awesome pledge for Inventors of the South Tigris, which is the next game offered by Garphill Games. And something that I really do like about the South Tigris series is that all of these are dice worker placement games, which is one of my favorite mechanisms. But in this game, players are going to be inventing and developing different ideas and then publishing those into actual inventions. But in order to do that, you're going to be combining an invention board with an invention card. And there's all sorts of different combinations and permutations in the game, adding a lot of variety. But then each player is also going to have their own set of dice that they're going to be using to do all these actions, as well as a bunch of different tradesmen that they're going to be using along the way. Both your dice and your tradesmen exist on your own personal player board, and depending on where your dice are at the time that you use them, that's going to be giving you a special benefit depending on the action that you're performing. But then your tradesmen are going to exist on these tiles here, and these tiles are going to be stacked on top of each other, representing a tower. And every time all your tradesmen move up far enough so that the bottommost tile no longer has a tradesman on it, all those tiles are going to move downward, and then the bottommost tile is going to move to the top, acting like your workers are just moving up a never-ending tower, but it is a really neat way to get some additional bonuses on your turn when you're able to make that happen. But this giveaway is going to be for the Inventor Pledge, which gets you a copy of the game as well as a Kickstarter promo pack. And to enter this giveaway, all you got to do is leave a comment down below with the hashtag Inventor. And you can leave any comment that you like, but if you're looking for something in particular, maybe you could let us know of an invention idea that you might have come up with. For myself, I actually have a pretty long list of inventions because I had a habit of adding to my list every time I got a little too intoxicated back in university. And don't worry, it's been a long time since I added anything to that list. Most of them were ridiculous, but there's actually a few decent ones on there. And one that I actually really do want is a laundry detergent laundry bag so that you can just put all your laundry into the bag. And then when it's time to do your laundry, you just put the whole bag in the laundry machine, and then it dissolves into detergent and streamlines your laundry experience. If one of you out there steal this idea and make it a reality, I won't even be mad. Good luck in the giveaway, but that's not all we have today because we also have a pledge for Under Our Sun, which is a cooperative campaign style game that takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where the entire world is turned into a desert wasteland. A neat aspect of this game is that players are going to be alternating between a day phase and a night phase, and you're going to get actions for both of those phases. But the main action you want to take during the night phase is to sleep, because every time you enter the night phase, you're going to be drawing a night card, which is going to have some negative effects. And if you sleep, that's going to be getting you more actions in the following day phase. But sometimes you do got to sacrifice your sleep to get a little bit further on different things that you're trying to accomplish, like filming a YouTube video. And this game gives the players that option so that they can choose to do a little bit more, but at a consequence that they'll have to face later. And I also think it's really neat the way that the scenarios work in this game, because you're going to be playing through a scenario card. But then there's going to be different objectives that you can hit that can actually cause you to draw additional cards that can actually chain together until you finally get to the one that actually ends that scenario. But I think that's really neat because it can introduce new ideas and keep certain aspects secret from the players until certain events are triggered. And it can also lead cards to go in different directions depending on the decisions that the players make, which could result in a different card being drawn. And one other thing you should probably note about this desert wasteland is that pretty much everyone's hostile, and there is also a particular infection going around that you would probably rather avoid. But this giveaway is going to be for the combo pledge, which is going to get you a copy of the game as well as the deluxe character set and all unlocked stretch goals. And to enter this giveaway, all you got to do is leave a comment down below with the hashtag sun. And you can leave any comment that you like, but with summer just around the corner, I want to know what you're most looking forward to this summer. For myself, it's pretty much always the same. Heading up to northern Canada with my friends, just swimming and having barbecues and fishing and playing board games. It's pretty much what I look forward to all year. Good luck in the giveaways, but now let's go ahead and draw the winners for last week's giveaways. And we had a couple awesome ones last week as well, with the Harry Potter's Miniatures Adventure game and NEXUS Unsanctioned, the big box expansion. And to draw a winner, I use this fancy application here. The first one I'm going to draw for is the Harry Potter's Miniatures game. And I did mention for this one, I'm only going to be drawing from the YouTube comments. So let's go ahead and add the hashtag there, which was Potter. And we'll go ahead and draw those comments from last week's video. And we will start the raffle. So the winner of the Harry Potter's miniature game is, and I'm definitely going to say this correctly, Joss Wiegman. And Joss left a quote here that says, "I mark the hours, every one, nor have I yet outrun the sun. My use and value unto you are gauged by what you have to do." And this is from Hermione's Time Turner, which, despite reading several books and watching all the movies, I am not that knowledgeable on Harry Potter, but hopefully I did that quote a bit of justice. But now let's go ahead and draw for the NEXUS pledge, and we'll do the exact same thing here, except for this time I'm going to be including some extra entries from my Ko-fi members. And if you're not familiar with Ko-fi, it's pretty much the same as Patreon. They just treat their creators a little bit better and allow more of those donations to go to the creator rather than keeping it for themselves. And I do want to say that I appreciate all of you out there watching these videos and supporting this channel and giving me more motivation to continue to put out videos like this. But everyone on Ko-fi does have a very special place in my heart, because from YouTube I make about $20 per video that I do here, which is about like $1 or $1.50 per game that I cover in these videos. So from a financial perspective, these videos do not really make sense, but everyone on Ko-fi is helping to make these efforts a little bit more sustainable, and that really does mean a lot. So thank you so much. And if anyone is interested in supporting the channel, I do have a link to my Ko-fi in the description below, and it also does get you extra bonus entries into these giveaways, which is not a bad thing. Let's go ahead and draw the comments for the Nexus pledge, and we'll go ahead and draw a winner. And the winner is Sean Gildersleeve. Thanks so much for all the support, and I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a pretty sweet pledge here. And that is everything I have for you for this video here today. I hope you all had a fantastic week. I am filming this one a little bit earlier because I do have a lot going on this weekend, especially with the BreakoutCon that I'll be attending here in Toronto. And like I said, if you are there, feel free to reach out or say hello if you see me there. But I hope you all had a fantastic week with lots of games, and make sure to get all those games in before the warm weather, because it's always harder to get people to the table when it's so nice outside. But thanks so much for tuning in, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.